In today's day and age, we rely on a lot of external support for everything we do, and that's the human condition. We always rely on external support, but we have a lot less control over our ability to sustain in an emergency than we have in the past. Uh, for example, almost everything in your house probably requires an electrical connection. It probably requires, you know, internet to work. With the Internet of Things being a thing now, you know, internet goes down, your refrigerator might stop working, uh, and there are plenty of things that can cause power outages or other emergency scenarios where you may need additional supplies, and it's good to have them all in one place. Uh, for example, in this fairly modern home, the stove and oven are both electric. There's a charcoal grill out back, but you know, which is nice to have as a backup, but it doesn't always get the job done. So we're going to talk about making a crisis box. Um, you'll find a lot of information on the internet on things like bug out bags and people running off into the woods in case of emergency. But honestly, your best bet is probably to stay home. Stay in one place, shelter in place. You have your pantry. You've got food supply. You've hopefully got water, and if the water runs out, then we'll talk about taking care of that as well. It's a good idea to have emergency supplies in one place. So in case something happens, you have backups to anything critical. And we'll get right into it. The box doesn't really matter. In fact, most of these things, if you live like I do, my entire living space is full of stuff like this. This is more of a demonstration of what you may want to think about in case of emergency. All right, some of the basics you're going to need are first aid kits. I've got these lying all around my house. If you find a place where you're not within arm's reach, just move over a couple inches. But it's always good to have a first aid kit in a place where you know where it is. Near your emergency supplies is a great place for it. On that end, you'll also want soap, hand sanitizer, dish soap, something along those lines, for sanitation purposes. Hell, even a bottle of bleach in your cupboard is going to be useful. Just don't use too much bleach. Thermal blankets. I live in a very cold place. And most emergencies, most emergency situations, I have to take into account the possibility that it's going to get very cold. And we've got a lot of blankets. We've got, we can cover the windows with blankets and huddle together in one room for warmth. But have a few of these. They're cheap. They pack down small, and you can give them away without really thinking much about it. They will save lives. For lighting, you're going to want some kind of emergency lighting source, whether it's like a dynamo flashlight, preferably one with a USB port so you can charge your electronics. Tea lights or candles. Just make sure that you don't have them burning unattended, and that you put them out before you go to sleep. You don't want to start a fire and create more of a problem. If you want something to hold water in, this is a reproduction of an old U.S. Army canteen. This one has This one's got a canteen cup that goes with it. This one's got a canteen cup that goes with it. So you can boil water if you need to. I recommend if you do need to boil your water, you boil it in a separate vessel than what you cook with. Just to make sure there's no cross-contamination of anything and you keep your drinking water as clean as possible. I recommend having, gallon jugs, old soda bottles if you've got them, clean them out, and in case, if you've got them lying around at the first sign of emergency, fill them up with clean water from the tap, and, leave them be, let them alone, let them stand until you need them. Use them for drinking. If you have an alternate water source, or if the plumbing's still working, but the water is no longer safe to drink, it may still be safe to clean with. So, don't waste your drinking water on, tasks that don't need palatable water. Let's see. On that note, if the water does stop working, if you can't flush your toilet, you're going to want a roll of trash bags. You open them up, wrap them, around the bowl, put the seat over them, so you can, actually dispose of your waste, because you don't want that piling up for several days. Let's see. If you've got medications, I recommend having, several days supply. If you're running low, always make sure that you stock up. It doesn't really matter whether it's an emergency or not. You never know when you might not be able to make it to the pharmacy to resupply. Food. In most modern households, everything required to cook is electric. Here the stove is electric, the oven's electric. You might have a charcoal grill or a propane grill, and that's great. That's perfect. Just make sure that you always have backup fuel source for them. If you don't have one of those, or if you live in an apartment or something where you can't actually have a grill outside, it's worth investing in something like this is a Hobo Stove. It's a twig burner. It can fit alcohol stove in it, or you can burn fuel pellets or fuel tablets. Just if you use one of these, make sure that you know what you're doing. You should practice with them. And always make sure that you've got enough fuel to last you at least 3 days, just in case of an emergency. If you are using a camping stove or a hiking stove, a lot of household cookware doesn't really work on those. So you may need to have some, like a camping pot set. These are much lighter weight aluminum. You can get them in titanium as well. Because alcohol doesn't burn as hot as, say, what your stove gets. These will transfer heat more effectively. And so you're not wasting your fuel. But if you're using your grill or a wood fire, you may want cast iron, or you may want to use your household stuff. It's entirely up to you, but make sure that you know how your equipment works and that you actually practice with it. Let's see, food. We'll start with starches. It's a good idea to have shelf-stable starches like those prepackaged mashed potato powders, macaroni, things that cook quickly. Don't use too much water. Things like these glass noodles. And you want some variety, so it's not a bad idea to have a box of pasta, a box of glass noodles, a box of mashed potato powder. just so you can change things up. You're not eating the same thing every day. Packaged soups. They'll get you by. They're not a lot of calories, but you know, if you're hungry, these are quick, these are easy, and they'll keep you hydrated. And they'll make you feel full even if you haven't gotten a full meal out of it. You can also stock up on these hiking meals. These don't need to be cooked. You can just open it up and eat it, or you can use a flameless ration heater, or boil the bag for 10-15 minutes. Downside with these and with the other prepackaged hiking meals is that they're expensive. This wasn't too bad, but they can get quite expensive, especially if you're buying in bulk. So just keep that in mind. They're an option, and if you've got the money for it, by all means, they'll definitely get you by. Most breads aren't really shelf stable, but these tortilla packages, they're good for often up to a year. So if you see them on sale, toss them in, because bread's always nice. Let's see. Tinned goods like tomatoes. There's a tin of meatballs. Tinned stews. Lentils. Pasta sauce. Jars of pesto, corn. Even a tin of powdered milk, and more soups. These are generally shelf stable, last a long time, and most of them also don't need to be cooked or very minimal cooking. You don't want to have dry beans, because most dry beans not only need to be soaked for 24 hours, but many of them also need to be boiled for quite a long time before the toxins that are in the beans are pulled out, so they're safe to eat. That's fuel that you don't want to waste, and that's time that you might not have to prepare meals. So go with tinned beans or these boxes of beans, the modern tin. They'll save you time, they'll save you fuel, and it's an emergency. We're not eating gourmet. I would never suggest someone actually eats prepackaged, freeze-dried mashed potatoes unless it's an emergency or unless you're out hiking or something and you just need the calories. But, this is not a box for gourmet eating. This is a box for survival. Let's see. Isotonic drink mixes. You want some way to stay hydrated, but also to replenish the salts that you might be lacking. Though if you're eating a lot of these tinned things, you probably don't need to add any salt to your diet. But just in case, especially if you're in a hot place or a very cold place, it's important to maintain your electrolytes. Got a tube of miso paste. Just add to boiling water. Good breakfast. I think that covers the food. And even things like these instant noodle packs, they'll definitely get the job done. They're not great, not exactly healthy, but they're cheap. You can stock up on them, and they cook quickly enough where you're not going to be wasting fuel just to eat. And shelf-stable snacks, like I've got these banana chips. I take them hiking, but pretty much anything that you can take hiking, you can put into a crisis box. just fine. Where does that leave me? And just as important as feeding yourself, staying warm, and making sure that you've got alternate light sources, it's just as important to keep yourself occupied. The common standby is the deck of cards, but if you're not into card games, or you can only play solitaire for so long before you want to strangle people, it's a good idea to have good idea to have some reading material, books, magazines. You can pick up these puzzle books at most grocery stores, most places in the world. And especially if you've got kids, you're going to want to have something like coloring books and a box of crayons, just in case. Because keeping them occupied is probably better for your sanity than keeping yourself occupied. And it'll keep them from worrying if it is an actual emergency. Now, if you find yourself asking what's the point of all this, don't worry. This is just the basics on things to keep in mind. This isn't the box that I have set up for myself. These are props. These are representations of ideas. You need to have food. I think this is enough food for 2 days, 2 people, maybe more. If you include the pasta and the potatoes and whatnot, it's probably enough for 3 or 4 days for 2 people. But that's not really the main concern I have with this box. You just want to have a system in place in case something happens. If you're prepared for an emergency, for example, flooding or major power outage due to heavy ice storm or a windstorm or forest fires, where it's safer, if you're in a position where it's safer to shelter in place than it is to leave, then you'll want to be able to get by without access to running water or electricity. And nowadays that's a difficult prospect. And some of the first things you're going to want to do is, of course, eat the food that can go bad, the stuff that's in the fridge. That should be your first step. The box is not necessary. If you keep a well-stocked pantry, if you have other emergency supplies, but if you're the type where you don't really plan ahead that far, you don't maintain a fully stocked pantry at all times. You go out to eat more often than you eat at home, or you eat fresh foods more often than you eat shelf-stable foods. Set up a box. Shove it in a corner. Check it every 6 months to every year. Make sure that things haven't expired. Make sure that you know how to use the equipment that you have in there. If you've got things that require batteries, make sure that the batteries are still good. For most situations, most emergencies, you're not going to want to leave your home. And if you do need to evacuate, you're probably not going to have to carry much with you. Just carry the basics. And I'll cover in a future video things to pack either as a bug out bag or as you're ordered to evacuate. Here are the things you're going to need. For now, we're just covering the basics of hunkering down, sheltering in place, and it's almost 2022. Most of us are fully aware of what shelter in place means, and we're lucky enough where the past couple of years have not been, even if we haven't been able to go out and do a lot of the things that we have been doing, we haven't been without the basics. For most of us, electricity's still been constant, the internet's still available, phone lines and running water haven't really been a problem, at least for the majority of the time. But in the future, you never know. Especially with climate change and everything going on, we don't always know what's we don't always know what's around the corner. We just need to do our best to keep ourselves safe, keep our family safe, and keep our community safe. If you're doing okay, if some kind of crisis happens and you've got all the supplies you need in your pantry, but you've got this you've got one of these boxes set up, and one of your neighbors is struggling. Maybe they missed grocery day. It's maybe their payday is 2 days from now, and crisis hits. They haven't been to the grocery store in a couple weeks. They're running low on supplies. By all means, share with them. It's helping your neighbors helps everybody. It's for the same reason that we prepare to reduce strain on the systems that keep everyone going. Helping your neighbor also reduce that strain means that we can bounce back faster from any crisis. Yeah. So that's it. In a future video, I'll cover bug-out bags. I'll cover emergency supplies to take with you if you need to evacuate, or hospital bags, or what have you. And I'll get back to the outdoors videos soon, or maybe in a few months. It depends on how the weather goes, because I really don't like the cold, and winter's already definitely here. So in the meantime, I'll be doing how-to videos and basic survival stuff that I can film from inside. A few things I forgot to mention. You're probably going to want to include a radio of some kind in your emergency kit, whether it's a hand-cranked radio to listen in for emergency broadcasts, or a ham radio for similar. If you don't have a license for your ham radio, you can still listen in. That's perfectly acceptable. That's perfectly legal. If you're in a country that has a specific frequency for emergency broadcasts, you'll want to have that written down with your radio and probably have it pre-tuned there. If you're in a country like the U.S., where the emergency broadcast system will interrupt every station, then then just have it tuned to whatever station you normally listen to. Then that's an additional form of entertainment as well. You'll also want to consider having something like water filters or water purification tablets, just in case the water's not safe to drink and you didn't get to fill your reserves in time, or if your reserves run low, you'll want to be able to clean your water. Learn how to use those, read the instructions, and make sure that they'll actually do what you need them to do. You'll also want an extra supply of things like toilet paper and other hygiene items, just in case something happens and you run out, or you're already running low. You don't want to be out of those things. And if you like this kind of content, please consider liking and subscribing. We have in the works future videos on building a first aid kit, emergency first aid, survival cooking, foraging, building fire starters, different arts and crafts you can do in the woods or with stuff that you found in the woods. I hope you never need to actually use any of the information in this video, but I hope it was informative, and I hope you have a great day. Use a flameless ration heater. Yeah, words.